Thank you to PlayStation for sponsoring this video. This video will explore the entire story of Saros, from the characters and audio logs to its main story and multiple endings. Saros is a third-person shooter with a focus on bullet hell combat. Deaths will fuel your progression as you slowly gain stats and upgrades to help you progress further, as well as modifiers to help adjust the level of challenge to your liking. All on a shape-shifting planet that changes with each run, a planet that is also the last place our protagonist's wife was last seen, but we'll discuss that part throughout this video. Saros is also currently available right now to play for yourself, so use the link in the description if you want to pick it up. As always, I want to issue a spoiler warning before we begin, as we'll be going over the entire game from front to back and discussing some endgame spoilers very early. And of course, a huge thank you to PlayStation for providing me with a code to the game early. Without further ado though, let's get started. Saros begins on the planet of Carcosa. A large corporation by the name of Soltari recently discovered the planet contained a material called leucynite. Reports suggest that back home there may be an energy crisis, and this material leucynite is said to be incredibly powerful. An entire city could be powered for a decade with only a kilogram. Naturally, a company like Soltari only cares about profits, projecting a whopping $1 trillion revenue increase. So, Soltari sent 3 Echelon teams to the planet for leucynite mining production. Echelon I was the primary team, who were sent to the planet to create colonies and mining sites. Echelon II would arrive later with thousands of employees who would build, operate, and repair the tech needed for mining. Echelon III was the civilian side. They would keep the colonies up and running. These are non-essential personnel such as small business owners, wealthy passengers with a personal interest in planetary relocation, and volunteers willing to provide lifelong service to Soltari in exchange for basic lodgings here on Carcosa. This initially was the plan: keep the colonies and mines going and ship that leucynite back home. However, contact with all 3 teams was lost, so Soltari sent in Echelon IV, an emergency crew who is to find out what happened, get operations running again, and if needed, dispatch any threats that come in the way of mining the leucynite. Echelon IV is a varied crew whom we'll meet in due time, but within them is our protagonist, an enforcer named Arjun Devraj. The beginning of the game makes it pretty clear though that Arjun does this for more than just a paycheck. Among the list of Echelon I crew was one Nitya Chandran, Arjun's wife. If something were to happen to her, Arjun would never forgive himself, so while he's here to help him find out what happened, he is more worried about what happened to his wife. In fact, that's where we are when we start the game. Arjun was out looking for Nitya but never found her. He was wandering the planet of Carcosa before being killed by its native wildlife. Despite that, Arjun can return from death. This is more than just a simple gameplay mechanic. Arjun can not only revive, but he's also the only one who can. Details revealed later tell us that Nitya was the one who built this device, and that the only reason Arjun can revive is likely because of his connection with Nitya. It's not fully explained, nor is that even a proper answer, but it's the wildly assumed theory by the group's computer primary. Regardless, it is clear that time does pass differently here. Arjun claimed to be only gone for a few hours, but it was actually days. Further, it's revealed that the time difference between some of the Echelon crew's arrivals was centuries, even though that's impossible. As he gets back to the passage though, he meets with Tarn, a member of Echelon IV, who seems to have gone mad before being put down by Sheridan. Tarn was acting rather strange, and yet, even stranger, he's not the only one. More people from Echelon IV's crew are missing or dead. Something is going on with the planet, and so let's finally talk about that. But to do that, we're going to have to talk about some endgame stuff, so you've been warned once again. The planet of Carcosa is unique because of its eclipse. Eclipses typically belong to families, and they often follow a similar pattern. An eclipse seen today will not appear for another 18 years. One eclipse may occur between those days, the same one won't appear for a while. This period of time is referred to as a Saros. What's strange about Carcosa is that it's not only the same exact eclipse, but it's also happening more frequently than it should. It also seems to have some adverse effects on the planet. Leucynite seems to be more potent during an eclipse. People start to lose their minds, and animals native to the region are more hostile. Trying to piece together the nature of the eclipse is the game's biggest mystery. Soltari personnel have tried to figure out the same thing, but an electromagnetic field seems to cause some significant data loss with each eclipse. However, Naoma of Echelon III later found out the answer. In truth, there is no moon. For an eclipse to happen, a moon must be present, but there is, according to her research, no moon. This then seems to be some kind of cosmic entity. There is a cutscene later which shows tentacles coming out of the eclipse. Something is controlling this planet and creating this eclipse with its influence, although the nature of this entity remains a secret. This entity, though, is the sole reason behind everything happening on this planet. This then leads us right to the beginning of our story when Soltari first sent out the Echelon teams. Echelon I was the first to arrive, which notably again has Arjun's wife among its ranks. Many of the staff were incredibly intelligent, eager to work on something this grand, and were all on the same page. The crew was working together, creating colonies for future echelons, mapping out the ecosystem, and recording history. Delroy, their commander, was an experienced astronaut who never faltered in his dedication to his role, so he was the first one picked for the Echelon program. Dr. Micah Wild's role required him to be alone for periods of time studying the planet, but due to his previous work, he showed that he is capable of being isolated for long periods of time. Codil mapped out the flora and fauna of Carcosa to learn its properties. Garcia handled security and native threats. Kira handled the repairs of their tech and primary unit, which is a Soltari AI, and finally is Nitya. She is considered possibly the most vital member of the team, who is to document, analyze, and possibly modify the planet's ecosystem to create a better tomorrow. There is likely way more than just these few, but these are the only ones who are mentioned. We also unfortunately don't know much of their reasons for coming to Carcosa, all except Nitya. Nitya was presumably a childhood friend of Arjun's. They then later got married and lived together. But while Nitya seemed to soar, reaching new heights within her profession, Arjun mostly drank himself to sleep. In a flashback, we could see Nitya and Arjun in their home. Nitya had just been accepted by Soltari to be a part of the Echelon program, but she was having doubts. The suit's AI claims that this lab down here in the cathedral is her first sacrifice, and this place notably leads to this flashback. Her ties to Arjun were holding her back, her desire for a new beginning, and so she sacrificed her life as the wife to be the researcher she wanted to be. The flashback shows Arjun passed out after another night of heavy drinking. Arjun says that in regards to who he works with, if you aren't drinking with them, then you're not a part of them. The bond he has with these partners is extremely toxic. Nitya compares them and Arjun to his father, something he finds irritating, asking her to never do that again. Flashing forward, we can see that she was writing a draft to decline her invitation to the program. Despite their broken relationship, she seemed ready to just stay here and be who she was with Arjun. Meanwhile, Arjun is outside arguing about a screw-up. Someone was killed during a job, but he's downplaying the death, saying that they have to stop these conspiracies, that it was just an accident, and that this guy has to be mourned and nothing more. In another scene later, the email has changed. She's accepted her role into the program and messaged Kira, telling her that she's eager to work with someone like her on this project. As she goes to leave though, Arjun begs her to stay, but she is undeterred. Arjun claims that she is nothing without him, but she rebukes, saying that she is nothing with him, twisting the words to mean that Arjun did not make her who she was, but rather he was holding her back. She then leaves their home and becomes Dr. Chandran, a member of Echelon I. Work began steadily on the planet for a time. Nitya was happy with her team and their research, but she became rather interested in Kira. She could listen to her speak all day, and her enthusiasm for their work was otherworldly. It's implied that Kira and Nitya's relationship on Carcosa was romantic. However, it was not long after this that something happened. The very first eclipse came, and things started changing. This entity started to slowly warp their minds. There is a frequent mention of a place called the Yellow Shore. This is the final level in the game. As you'd expect, its nature is also an anomaly. It's not on any planetary maps and seems to exist in some kind of pocket dimension in its own reality. All we know though is that it is an eye of need, the god of desires, and has a ceaseless feast for want. A letter written from a member of Echelon III puts it as divine and blazing, that it's inside every one of us, thirsting for their desires and needs. It's waiting for it, born from it, consuming it, feeding it, and anointing it. So this entity, which controls the Yellow Shore, or perhaps is the Yellow Shore, feeds on desires and wants. We as humans have desires, goals, and ambitions, and the Yellow Shore harnesses those and corrupts you from within. It also twists you, forces you to seek it out. It promises more than you could ever want, but also takes more than you can ever imagine. One of the very first people to hear this call of the shore was Micah Wild. He started to stare into the sun when he arrived, claiming that he could hear something speak to him. Many of the crew thought he was mad or scared, and when he disappeared, he seemed to not be missed, but it was during this solitude that Micah saw the truth. He claims that he stood atop a place called the Blue Precipice and stared at the sun. Like the Yellow Shore, the Blue Precipice is also a place with a capitalized name. We unfortunately never get to see this Blue Precipice in-game, so it may not even be a place, merely an idea. But I believe this concept to be opposite to the shore. To keep it simple, I suspect that while the Yellow Shore feeds on desires and wants, the Blue Precipice offers clarity and honesty. Walker of Echelon III called it accepting the real truth, while also offering clarity and peace. So perhaps it's an idea or concept that offers the truth, untainted by the yellow. However, another crewmate, Red Irvine, described Walker as having been afflicted with bottomless sadness. With that in mind, the Yellow Shore may then show you how you want it, regardless of reality, while the Blue Precipice shows you how it is. It may hurt, but it's at least the real truth. This may explain why the Yellow Shore has such a pull on people, as it does not show the bad, only the good, and many people are not willing to accept uncomfortable realities, so they run from the blue, while the yellow blinds them with false hope and promises. But of course that's just a theory of mine, as we only have scraps to go off here. Regardless, Micah stood atop this place and was ready to fall, ready to surrender to its power, but right before that he stared at the sun. When he stared at the sun, it showed him everything. How broken he was, what he wanted, and what he needed. He then came back to the crew golden. Not literally, perhaps metaphorically golden. They were in awe at what they saw, and were willing to follow him to the ends of the earth. All except Delroy, who had experienced hate like no other. Hate that will continue to boil with time. While the timeline then gets a bit fuzzy at this point, the Yellow Shore began corrupting the people of Echelon I, with Micah also guiding them towards what he saw that night. Nitya said that they all heard the call of the shore, the Yellow. She believed her dreams and ambitions to be too small in comparison to what the shore showed them. That they could be so much more than who they are now, they just had to give in to this Yellow Shore. But a hollow log at the cathedral shows us some of the Echelon I crew with Delroy in command. Many of the crew were given names: Bastion, Shepherd, even Priestess, names that you will likely be all too familiar with. Scattered throughout the game are structures and creatures that suggest that an ancient civilization used to live here on this planet. This civilization was Echelon I. The description for the king says that there is human DNA within him, and each of them was given names just like the ones attached to the bosses we face. They are the ancient civilization. One of the first places they built was the cathedral, which was very regal and royal, adorned in gold trimmings and marble. 6 names are listed in a document here, the 6 gods of Carcosa: the prophet, architect, shepherd, voice, priestess, and king, all of whom are the remnants of the Echelon I crew. The Yellow Shore had convinced them to become gods, overlords of Carcosa, and they obeyed its commands to the bitter end. At some point, it seems like the Echelon II crew had then arrived on Carcosa, and it did not go well. They ruled as gods of this new world, and waited eagerly for Echelon II to arrive. The second crew, as you'll recall, was the miners and engineers, those who would work on the mines and produce the Lucenite so it could be shipped back home. So the Echelon I crew used their skills and turned them into slaves. Little records exist of Echelon II. There are no notable members in the databank, and Echelon II is not attached to any of the Soltari staff. It is fair to assume though that the unmarked names in the audio logs are the staff of Echelon II. Much of the reason behind this was that as soon as they got off the boat, they were put to work. All the staff were mining resources and being used for whatever Echelon I saw fit to do. Much of their work could be seen in just about every place in Carcosa. They were sent to the ancient depths to mine Lucenite, but for their purposes, not Soltari's. The depths are covered in machinery and ancient tech, something far more advanced than what Soltari could have built. The area was also guarded with machines that still roam the halls and rooms to this day. They were also then put to work in the Blighted Marshes. The marshes contain a massive black dam that was used as both a dam and a wall. Beyond this are the holy places, Acolyte's Heaven, and the Cathedral. So Echelon II is barred from ever seeing the gods' holy land. Many who were put here didn't even know what the dam was being built for. Some even believed that this was built to keep them small, that the gods could laugh at them as they stand above. But both the dam and the other buildings within the marshes were built via forced labor. Evidence also suggests that the marshes used to be a thing of beauty before Echelon I put them to work. Because of their repeated industrial work and the abandonment of said work, it has now turned the once great marshland into a polluted swamp. A major landmark within the civilization was the desecrated fortress. It used to be called the city or citadel, but its new name speaks for itself. It's now desecrated beyond repair, last used as a bastion of defense in a war, one that we'll talk about soon. But the once great city was likely built by Echelon II, and if not by them, then with them. Over time, it seems like the crew was slowly turned into various creatures and designs once their usefulness ran out. A log talks about how their fingers were broken and their skin red and raw. They then became the very thing we walk by as we explore Carcosa. Echelon II was twisted and broken until they were macabre art pieces. Bodies holding up pillars, hands stretched out reaching for nothing, tapestries made of flesh. All the remnants of Echelon II. Even as far as the Shattered Rise, the farthest place from the Citadel, the crew still has their essence in every wall and floor. And to make sure they knew who was in charge, they brought Echelon II's ship to port. There is no reason why they would use this ship instead of just make their own, so it's assumed that this was done as a show of force, so that those of Echelon II knew that they were stuck here forever under their thumb. Further, they may even be the very creatures we face. The wildlife and creatures of Carcosa are just as confusing as every other part of the planet. There does seem to be some native wildlife that did exist on Carcosa before Echelon arrived. Osteomoths, sunflares, and flexions, among others, seem to be native to the planet. Much of their descriptions are basic, noting their abilities and quirks, but it seems though many were eradicated to suit the needs of the gods. The Excubator enemy description mentions that this unit would really excel at species extermination, and that fauna and flora have been genetically altered or even outright removed. So Echelon I was hard at work removing what they didn't want from the environment. This caused many environmental changes across various species. The Flexions eventually evolved to have a strong primal variation. But instead of coming from natural evolution, which is a desire to evolve around its predators, it seems to have come from the lack of apex predators on the planet, thus allowing them to expand and grow. Contrast this though with some of the other creatures here, like the Custodians or Guardians. They are mechanical units that seem to be defense assets. They contain mechanical husks, but also have traces of organic matter within them. Similarly, the Harbingers and Lysa seem to have been created as a result of third-party experimentation. The Prime Custodian log highlights the lack of sophistication in the models, further saying that a civilization like this that created remarkable technological feats should surely be capable of something far greater than this machine intelligence. The text saying, "Let flesh bear every burden," and the hypothesis that the design was done deliberately could imply what we've discussed. The creatures could very well just also be a part of the Yellow Shore and working with the entity. The vessels are said to have a collective consciousness across the planet. They're considered the all-seeing eyes of gold, meant to chase away the blue from the yellow. We talked earlier about the Blue Precipice and the Yellow Shore. These are supernatural places or ideas that are soon to be at odds with each other. Now, whether this is simply due to their nature, a kind of yin-yang or chaos and order kind of dynamic, or there are two literal entities waging a war with each other, we don't know. But it seems clear that the Yellow Shore has its own army that feeds it information. Obviously, like a lot of this game, it's many questions and few answers. However, we are at least aware of some of the intent behind the designs. Machines in the depths are designed for mining and subjugation. Veils were made for crowd control, likely to both keep people out of areas they shouldn't be in, and to corral large groups to where it wants them to go. Prime Custodians, an upgraded version of the original model, was made explicitly to quell the Shepherd's Flock, aka Echelon II. The Keepers are an enemy that were for a time made to bore through rock and mine Lucenite. Hollowers provided a similar function, but the Keepers used explosives. This caused harm to the stability of the region, implying that they did not care, and that they were willing to destroy anything if it meant getting more Lucenite. Many of the places closer to the gods also contain creatures that are almost explicitly meant to be remnants of the crew. Confessors have numerous limbs attached to their body, and it's believed to be in constant pain 24/7. Promises are hung upside down on purpose to avert their eyes away from the sun and the eclipse, likely as a form of punishment with a potential reward of absolution if they endured the pain long enough. Using the promises of the Yellow Shore though, they were able to convince and inspire some to continue working. The Aurelia creature within the fortress is assumed to be a mix of people from Carcosan high society. This implies not just a hierarchy, but was also used to set an example. Lesser citizens likely saw the Aurelia as a goal, a destination, a thing of inspiration, that if they worked hard enough and were blessed by the shore, they too could be this divine holy creature. So to some, this was not servitude and death, but a rebirth, or illumination as the game often calls it. Some truly wanted this to happen. They had a desire to be a part of the gods' world as they felt that this was their purpose, their calling. So what we have here is a society in which the Echelon I crew became gods, ruled over the land, and then the people of Echelon II. They decimated the land, changed the ecosystem, and ruined the stability of various regions in an attempt to achieve their own personal goals. They then enslaved the people of Echelon II, forced them to work their mines and self-built factories to create their structures, only to then be put through an incredibly gruesome ascension that built, twisted, split apart, and killed their previous bodies, so that even in death they could still serve as the foundation for their society, one where the gods are on top and everyone else serves them. But it wasn't long until this power went to their heads. A power struggle had broken out amongst the rulers, each vying for power. The Yellow Shore had promised them everything, but not everyone had found that everything. Delroy dreamed of becoming a ruler, this king of the Yellow Shore. His personnel file states that he is keenly aware of his ability and has little tolerance for challenges to his authority. I think this part of him became corrupted by the shore. Much of his audio logs talk about becoming king, ruling over everyone, and being the first and last king of the planet. Not everyone agreed with his views, however, as Micah believed himself to be king. He was the first one who found the shore and showed it to everyone, so he deserves to be the first king. Micah also says that they were meant to ascend together, but that even in this holy temple, they deny him his throne. Nitya also says that she wanted a turn at the wheel for once. One of her hollows says that to many she was seen as a god. She was given everything by Delroy, yet the people adored her more, and he hated that. He hated seeing people get more praise than him. So as punishment, he made her his puppet. He took everything from her, while she had to sit back and smile. She wants to take action, but resistance would mean replacement, so rather than be replaced, she would replace him. A war had then been fought between the gods. The allegiances and factions a part of this war go unnamed, but it seems that everyone was against each other except Kira, who allied herself with Nithya. While I cannot provide an accurate retelling of the battles and the forces therein, as no records exist, there are some things worth noting. The Eclipsed version of the desecrated fortress is still being shelled. This is likely not happening at this exact moment, we may just be seeing a glimpse into what was going on back then. Numerous creatures like the Devastators and Wardens were also explicitly designed to be tools of war, as their equipment suggests no greater purpose than conquest. The Wardens especially are noted as being hastily thrown together, perhaps a last-ditch effort to win the war. An audio log of Nithya's also mentions her followers and her army, so they did not fight one-on-one, it was a large-scale battle using forces and assets. Another states that the decision to start the war was hers, thus it may have occurred shortly after the Hollow in the cathedral, where Nithya and Delroy get into a scuffle. Of course, that does beg the question of what these armies they control consisted of. Were the people of Echelon II forced to fight each other, or are they simply referring to the machines and creatures they created? We're not entirely sure, but what we do know is what happened as a result of the war, as each of the game's major bosses tells us exactly where they ended up. The very first boss, the Prophet, is Micah Wild. He failed to become king and was cast down as the King of Rot. Now he sits here festering and rotting in his own filth and regret. He hopes that one day the king will see that Micah is needed, but for now he stays down here, stuck, lost, and forgotten. Kira suffered a rather awful fate as her body was destroyed, now serving as nothing more than a voice, the exact role Delroy had planned for her. All she does now is whisper to those who are willing to hear her. The death and erasure of Kira are especially hard for Nithya, who mourns her even today. She wrote a letter to her, telling her of their plan to build a life here together forever, as well as talking about a tree that they would grow here, but that forever is just a dream now. The hunger in Nithya that desired the throne is no longer here now, that was gone after Kira was killed. She felt that it was all slipping away, that she couldn't call herself a god if she couldn't even protect her. So with her out of the war, that left the last three members, Delroy, Garcia, and Codil. According to the notes, there was a major stalemate between Delroy and Codil, centuries of turmoil and war with no clear victor. The deciding factor was Garcia, who joined Delroy, and from there, the war was over. Strangely though, Garcia later became both the Bastion and the Architect, as that's what Delroy called her in the Hollow log. Garcia was considered all-seeing by Delroy, and her role as a part of the Echelon I crew was colony infrastructure, as she would help prepare Echelon II for their eventual work. This makes sense in regards to Bastion, as its purpose was to be the last line of defense while within the ancient depths. Running a scan on the creature though reveals 12 distinct voices from within the creature, so Garcia may just be one of the many put in here. Or perhaps it's because Delroy had greater plans for her that the Bastion had to have the extra parts and voice put into it. Because the Architect seems to be the real body. This entity had a hand in the city's creation, which is why it may feel protective over the fortress. The secret text at the bottom says it straight, that Delroy took her mind and made her another beast within the wilds, made her defend her fortress in his name. Codil would then become the Shepherd, a monster cast down by Delroy, who now resides within the sea. Further, its destructive nature is not self-defense, but rage. Rage at the world and Delroy for putting him here, as he suffers in eternity at sea. But then that leaves the king, who must be Arnold Delroy. It does not have a name, merely called the king, but it does have human DNA within it. But despite winning, there was little joy to be had in this victory. Delroy looked upon his broken and destroyed kingdom, and he screamed. It meant nothing, it was nothing. Not the king in yellow, but the king of despair, king of insects. He always craved more, he desired more, so he took his loyal subjects and fled to the yellow shore. All that remains now is him, those subjects, and his priestess, who he hates. He hates this one, he hates the ones before her, and will likely despise the ones who come after. Nithya was the original priestess, but after her betrayal he became suspicious of the future priestesses, continually worried that they would be like Nithya, gathering more favor than him. From within this sphere grew weakness that the shore would seek to exploit. In-game notes question if the king truly is one, or if he's just a puppet that holds strings while its own are pulled by another. The yellow text saying chained by golden thread likely gives us all our answers. It's also believed that many of the bosses and creatures we faced to get here were all made as deterrents, to stop people from following the path and from attempting to usurp Delroy as king. The only member who's gone unnamed so far then is Nithya. Nithya was the priestess, but not this priestess. Delroy seems to have had a consort and many priestesses who served him. Nithya was the first, but she ran, so Delroy replaced her with another. Becoming a priestess to the king is a sought-after position to some, but it's a rather tough employment. It is not unheard of for a priestess to be removed, possibly killed, and then replaced with another. The imagery of the priestess having multiple bodies is likely a reference to this phenomenon, that this is not the first, and if this continued, it would not be the last. But due to their lack of agency as they are at the beck and call of the king, their forms are unrecognizable. One priestess likely looks no different from the other. The entity that is the Eclipse seems to select the candidates itself and then grants them this body, but this priestess is currently in captivity here in the cathedral. Now that we've talked about all this, I do want to mention one quick thing that has been puzzling me, and that's their current forms. It's known that the Eclipse is what grants these transformations, but what of Echelon I? Did they transform into these creatures before the war, or was the result of the war what spurred these transformations? I believe it's the latter, as numerous logs depict them as human, yet are still considered gods by their subjects. Going back to Nitya though, she would have a change of heart. She laments in an audio log that all they wanted was power, worship, and control, but that this obsession needs to stop. She says herself that before she used to believe that she could create something better, to be a high priestess of perfection, but as she looks out at the world, at the battlefields of war, she realizes that that's not how this world works. So she ran until she couldn't see it anymore, before then getting to work atoning for her sins. Nitya worked day and night, lifetime after lifetime, trying to repair what they did. She had created the Preserver, or the Revival Machine, and there is also another entity in here called Constant. True to its name, it's meant to be her constant anchor to this place. Along with the Revival technology, which gave her limitless time to fix her mistakes, Constant would help her remember her past actions, and they would work together to fix this. However, Constant has been alone for centuries. Nitya never visited and left it here alone. It's to my understanding that Constant is the one that holds back the tide of the Yellow Shore. It's only after talking to it later that it reveals the path to the Yellow Shore. Constant was meant to serve as her wall to bar those from entering the shore. Now, as we've seen though, the Eclipse can still compel minds, leading one to question what Constant really has done in the end. I think realistically they were designed to physically block access to the shore. Getting here is almost like a pilgrimage, and those who are enraptured by the promises of the shore are often seen trying to find it. Alab and Lena of Echelon IV, for instance, follow this path, eager to find this shore, but they won't until Arjun opens the path later. Opening the path may feed more souls to the shore and thus power the entity, so Nitya is trying to prevent that. It's not exactly a fix, more like damage control, for something that is too far along to stop. The Eclipse and everything else can likely never be stopped, so she's doing her best to amend what she can. That's why she essentially had to abandon Constant, as it was meant to be left alone and forgotten. If it was found, someone would then try to find the Yellow Shore, which is exactly what Arjun will do later. But all of that would take some time. At some point post-war, the crew of Echelon III had arrived on Carcosa. Audio logs from Eli talk about the machines in the depths having minimal decay despite their abandonment, so Echelon III arrived sometime after the war broke out. I suspect that if Echelon III had not, they would have likely suffered the same fate as Echelon II. It's likely due to the power struggle and fractured state of the world that Echelon III was at least given a fighting chance to survive, but they too would also succumb to a grim fate. Echelon III made camp at Shattered Descent and was able to build a fairly decent base for themselves. Their skills, however, were admittedly lacking. They were meant to serve and uplift an already functioning colony, not start one. Efforts were made to find the crews of Echelon I and II, but they found no people, only a data core from Echelon II's primary unit. It took a while to decode, but then they found what happened to the crew and how they were enslaved. The Eclipse was also corrupting them the same way that it corrupted the other crews. Echelon III then started to become reckless. Carly Irvine of Echelon III shot their primary unit. It kept preaching the ways of Soltari, but she and the others knew that the Yellow Shore was what mattered now. They then journeyed the planet almost like a pilgrimage, tracing their steps to the desecrated fortress. What became of this journey was like a war in itself. All of Echelon III fought each other. Those who believed in the shore versus those who didn't. Friends, family, lovers, they all picked a side, and then they killed each other. Notes and audio logs give us a brief glimpse into this time in history. People tried to hide and cower in caves as they safeguarded those who weren't consumed by the power of the Yellow Shore. Others had to put down loved ones consumed by the power or were succumbing to that power in real time. Others, though, had found the Blue Precipice, seeking its peace and honesty, even in the darkest of moments. In the end, just about everyone had died. That then leads us to now, where our crew of Echelon IV has arrived to uncover what happened to the 3 previous crews, but they too were also starting to feel its effects. Alab is a part of the Soltari Executive Council. He cares very little for anyone on this team and is even trying to see how he can gain leverage over the board using Lucenite. His power knows no bounds as his orders even supersede the primary unit, and he was planning on taking control of this unit from Sheridan once they got settled in. But he left and never returned, as he now seeks out the shore. He is not possessed like some of the others, but he is drawn to its power, and the shore offers that limitlessly. Lena, one of the Enforcers, also disappears, but that's due to her resignation. She feels that Soltari knew about what happened here but still sent them anyway, so now she's on her own as she too searches for the Yellow Shore. Bierce was killed prior to the game beginning, having fallen off a cliff while staring at the sun. This is a lot like what happened with Micah and the Blue Precipice, but as we know so little about Bierce, it's unclear what exactly he saw back then. And Tarn, as we recall from the intro, is dead. His eyes were red, although it's more likely golden in this case, as he succumbs to the powers of the Eclipse and is killed. All that's left now are Sheridan, Kayla, Stack, Jerome, and Arjun. And so now that the history has been explained, and we're all caught up, let's walk through the present and see how Arjun handles Carcosa, as we wonder if he'll ever find out what happened, or even find Nitya. Returning from where we left off, after Tarn is killed, Arjun is asked to search for a Soltari signal that they found as it could point them towards the colony. This quest will take him all the way to the king, but along the way many noteworthy things happen. Arjun soon finds remnants of the ancient civilizations of Echelon I. Of course, he is unaware that it was Echelon I and believes them to be aliens of some kind. When in the ancient depths, he is forced to activate some equipment, which trips some security, revealing the position of Jerome Jackson and subsequently getting him killed. Arjun also runs into the priestess down here, and it's not exactly clear why. This could be a different priestess, or perhaps the same priestess we fight later, who is now trying to escape, or perhaps her escape here resulted in her confinement. He'll then later find the remnants of the Echelon III settlement, but finds nothing of value on either the crew or Nitya. He continues forth and defeats the boss of the Blighted Marshes named Legion. I didn't exactly mention Legion earlier, so I wanted to stop by and do that now, because Legion is one of the few bosses in this game with no ties to Echelon I. According to its description, Legion is made up of tributes, the small things that swarm around the core. These splinter off during the fight and can be killed, making it easier to reach the core, but as you've likely experienced, they eventually just come back. The creature is self-regenerating and self-replicating, tearing off pieces of itself to create these tributes. Basically, it's a sacrifice at the behest of another. The final lines mention a her, possibly implying that Nitya changed her subjects and made some of them become Legion. As for some of the Echelon crew, he finds Lena and Alab of Echelon IV, and Eli and Claudia of Echelon III. Eli and Claudia are consumed by the shore, but Claudia is notably a hologram, or at least not human, which is odd as she's the only one who is seen like this. The rest of the Echelon IV crew also starts to go mad at this point. Sheridan is questioning the crew, believing that they are going against her authority. She has a superiority complex, as noted in her interview, which the shore takes hold of. Stack, on the other hand, is becoming more of a poet than pilot these days and has taken to painting the Eclipse. They end up dying due to disobeying Sheridan, and she will die shortly after once Arjun puts her down, leaving just him and Kayla left in passage. The fight against the Architect then caps off Act 1, which results in Nitya paying a visit to Passage and throwing something in the Preserver. It can still be used after this though, which begs the question of what she just did. It's possible that she did this to stop Arjun from reviving, and thus preventing him from pushing forward, but he's still able to use it anyway despite that. Although the answer may lie in the necklace, as this was hers initially, so her DNA may be involved somehow. Either way, it does seem to cause great pain to Arjun until he takes off that necklace. After he wakes up, he will then meet with Constant and then turn Primary back on. Following this, he chases Nitya to Acolyte's Heaven and kills Shepard, and then the Cathedral to defeat the Priestess. As part of her captivity, you are forbidden to climb the steps leading to her, and the only way to break this magic is to ring the bell above you. These are her shackles, the one Delroy put on her, so that his priestess could never gain more power than him. Arjun will then step through a door and arrive on some kind of shore. Nitya is there waiting for him. She had been waiting the whole time. The two embrace, and then that's when we get our first glimpse of this entity that is supposedly the moon. Arjun is then sent back through the revival machine for reasons I will explain later. He then talks to Constant and learns that this entity is the lock that bars the Yellow Shore. Arjun goes to unlock it, but it asks him to understand the consequences. Arjun has frequently let the goal of Nitya cost people lives. He lost Kayla's trust in him, Jerome was killed because he activated the security, and now he's willing to undo some of Nitya's work just to find her. It displays a real lack of empathy and consideration for those around him. But of course he is on a one-track mind, so this all culminates in the final battle against the king. Arjun's defeat of the king ends with him punching the creature, proclaiming that he is now king. He then enters a room looking for Nitya but finds no one. He is then pulled apart by the Eclipse, his eyes covered in gold, new limbs atop the old, as he is now reborn as the new king. Nitya stands at his side as he sits, another king, another puppet to the Eclipse. Arjun followed the path that Nitya tried to block, and in doing so, he played right into its hands. The Eclipse had been affecting Arjun since the moment he got here. Arjun is described as a nectar to the shore. he has so much desire and want within him that it overwhelms him, thus making him a prime target for the Eclipse. Arjun is a very driven but selfish individual. He learned from his father to take what he wanted, no matter what. He often learned this at the end of a belt. Arjun naturally hates his father because of this, but because of his actions he has become just like him. Much of his personality is narcissistic, and his dialogue possessive. While he does claim in the interviews that he does want to help the people of Echelon, there are many examples that prove otherwise. He'll admit to seeing his friend Sebastian as nothing. Kayla was lied to some time ago in her past, which caused her immense pain and made it hard for her to trust again. She regained some of that trust later in her life, enough for her to finally leave the house and get a fresh start. But Arjun broke her trust and yet cared little about her problems. He continually leaves Carcosa to chase down Nitya, leaving the crew wondering where he's gone all day. He continually activates the Eclipse, which accelerates and makes things dangerous on the planet's surface, and he accidentally tripped security, which later got Jerome killed. While much of his dialogue is about saving the colonists, other lines imply that this is merely a step towards his goal. That finding evidence of the Echelon crew really means more leads on Nitya. In regards to his wife, Arjun is actually incredibly possessive of her. He continually tries to paint himself as the hero here. Nitya followed the same path as Arjun and used Constant to close the path. This was so that no one could find the Yellow Shore, but Arjun believes that these were clues for him left by her. A hololog of Nitya's talked about her and Kira. Arjun showed anger at this, claiming that they had everything they wanted when they were together, even though that's not true. And in another holo, Arjun says that Nitya did what she had to survive, for him and for us. He puts himself at the front of the line here, believing that Nitya did this all for him, or at the very least, both of them, as if the idea that Nitya may be doing things for herself for once is an impossibility to him. The Yellow Shore knew this, and it latched onto it hard. During his travels, Nitya will often speak to him, asking to be saved. This is Arjun believing what he wants to hear. Nitya is not actually speaking to him, he merely believes that she is. Arjun's dream is like the cutscene after the priestess. His wife is alive and ready to jump into his arms to thank him for saving her. You'll frequently see this version of her glitch, and it's there where you could see how she really feels. So the Yellow Shore may have guided him using this fake voice of Nitya so that it could crown him the king and continue its cycle of feeding on people's wants. The same Nitya also appears next to the throne too, reinforcing that the Yellow Shore merely gave him what he wanted to see. Now it may seem odd to hallucinate such a thing, but he's already been doing it. Another member of the crew we have yet to talk about is Sebastian Torres. Sebastian is an old friend of Arjun who's tending flowers upstairs, never showing any signs of the corruption the others had. That's because he's not real. Sebastian died way before any of this stuff with Echelon happened. And this story of Sebastian is actually critical to the rest of our tale, as that ending was merely just the first. The real ending of Saros starts right after this with Arjun respawning back at Passage. It seems that we did not simply return before the final fight, but that Arjun genuinely did transform into the king and was brought back. One could say that we are now in some kind of loop, with Arjun continually killing his older versions that become king, but it's hard to say that this is a fact. The king does have human DNA within him, and like the priestess, I assume the Eclipse has an ideal look for the king, so it's not exactly specific to the person on the throne. That could very well still be Delroy, but it is also possible this is just a different Arjun, although I will say that's just simply a theory. What's clear though is that Arjun is back, and that he hasn't escaped yet, so to do this he must change his path. To that end, he follows a signal that takes him to various places on Carcosa. He finds Kayla hiding where the members of Echelon III built their colony. According to her, it's been years since they last met. Interestingly, her eyes are now blue, much like the gold in Sheridan or Tarn. She walks the path of the blue precipice, and that's why she's survived this long, because the shore can't reach her. She plans to stay here on Carcosa. She knows Soltari will send more people, so she's going to stay and help them, and Arjun encourages her to do that. She'll then tell him to seek out a tree, as a whisper has been speaking to her this whole time. This whisper is Kira, who is near the tree that Nitya planted for her. Kira offers lots of insight into things, and her conversations with Arjun and his attitude in general here in Act 3 are a complete 180. He admits straight up that he was wrong, that he should have helped Kayla, and that Jerome was a better man than him and deserved better. While with Kira, he also goes back to the cathedral and enters Nitya's lab. This is where Arjun first viewed the flashback that showed their life from Nitya's perspective. Down here though is the last hololog of Nitya planting the red tree. She confesses that she needed to be free of everything Arjun put her through. It cuts deep. Arjun finally sees how Nitya sees him, and that she never needed him to save her. If anything, he was her captor back home. When asked what he will become now, he says honest. Better. If he can. Part of that honesty is revisiting his past and acknowledging what really happened. Occasionally throughout the game, the banyan tree upstairs will glow. Entering sends Arjun into a world that's more like pieces of a puzzle. Individually they make little sense, but when combined they form a picture. The first 3 memories are fragmented parts of Arjun's past. They show some back alleys and cities of a place he called home. Just about everything in here is a reference to what we've discussed so far in the video. There is a reference to a club and drinking, highlighting Arjun's alcoholism. We could also see the club has some notable guests like YS, presumably the Yellow Shore. The posters and adverts also target Arjun. They mention the word power, which he always took when he could. Other posters just say one more, referring to one more bottle, a phrase he likely said time and again as he reached for the next. Basically, like the death scenes after a run, they are cluing you in on Arjun's eventual fate. The first of these memories, though, does show him looking at Jerome as he lay dead on a street corner. The next memory takes him past that door and into a hotel where he finds Sebastian. The third is then back in that room where he hears a conversation between a man and a woman who go unnamed. The final memory reveals the truth. Jerome's body was actually Sebastian's. The tale of Sebastian is a complicated one. Arjun back on Earth used to work security mostly for small corporations. One of his colleagues was Sebastian, who presumably worked with him. Notes found in these memories paint a possible picture of infidelity. Arjun messaged Nitya one day saying that they could not make their plans that night because of a big client that promised big money. Some guys later came by the house asking where he was, but Nitya had no idea, to which one of the men laughed and said, "I bet you don't." She then texted him later asking where he was last night. Memory 3 has 2 voices that are heard in the background. This seems to be Arjun and whoever he was meeting. This also notably takes place in a hotel room and not the home that Arjun lives in with Nitya. All these are filed under case evidence because Arjun is a person of interest in the case of Sebastian's death. Sebastian considered Arjun a dear friend. He rarely opened up to people, but Sebastian was one of the few who truly knew him. He knew that Arjun crossed lines, as so did he, but the problem is that Arjun stayed past those lines and never came back, so we get to save Arjun from himself. I think this means that he was planning on telling Nitya about what Arjun did, but he was killed before he could. This might explain the phone call in the flashback when he talks about this all being a conspiracy theory. He might have been trying to shut down any comments on the matter to avoid the truth coming out. But of course, Arjun cheating on Nitya would sort of run counter to the entire reason he came here, as if he didn't care, why bother? Perhaps the answers then lie in a letter. Written by Arjun, it talks about home. He mentions his father, specifically how he often hit his mother, saying, quote, "You hated her so much, but you needed her more." I think this is a good representation of the kind of relationship that he and Nitya had. That being said, the voice in the hotel sounds nothing like Arjun, and in fact the woman actually sounds a lot like Nitya. This could then mean that Nitya was seeing other people, perhaps even Sebastian, but I'm not confident in saying that's a fact. Further, context also suggests a fall may have occurred. Sebastian is near a window in the hotel room which breaks, and this is the same one Arjun falls through in the first ending. Much of Sebastian's dialogue can also, as we'll soon see, sometimes be a metaphor or reference to something. Arjun mentioned the dream he had in which Sebastian blamed him for what happened. He says that this sounds nothing like him, and that does he not catch him when he falls? Memory 3 suggests that Arjun also forced his way into the hotel room, so it's possible that a scuffle happened and Sebastian somehow died during it. But how this possible fight, if that even happened, connects to the cheating, if that even happened, is a mystery, which is why I don't want to say that any of this is the correct answer. As you've likely noticed from this video, unless the evidence is crystal clear, I always try to err on the side of caution before outright proclaiming something is true. So rather than make a bold definitive statement, I'll just provide the possible theories and let you come to your own conclusions. As what really matters is that Sebastian is dead, and Arjun is involved in it somehow. We also need not forget that Arjun is seeing Sebastian despite being dead. His talks with him, though, throughout the game are rather illuminating. Arjun talks about saving people and finishing the mission, which Sebastian chuckles at, since he never kept Sebastian safe. Later, he will comment on the Echelon crew, saying that it's not Arjun's normal crowd. His friends always take what they want without asking. The dutiful souls of Echelon IV that work for the greater good are not like his other friends. It's mostly a comment that's meant to make him reflect on the fact that he doesn't fit in here, because he's not here for the greater good, he's here for Nitya. After everything starts going wrong in the passage, Sebastian blames Arjun. He tries to deflect, saying that it's not his fault, but Sebastian rightfully points out that this is something he always says. That he always deflects blame and never takes accountability. Sebastian also comments on his plants, saying that he likes the power trip that comes from tending to the plants, as without them they will wither and die, further saying that altruism is a lie. To me, this is a line meant for Arjun more than his plants, as again, while he is trying to find the Echelon crew, this is really all to facilitate his real goal of finding Nitya. With the truth now revealed to him, his mind no longer compartmentalizing what happened, he is now ready to face the truth and let go. He faces the king once more, but rather than claim his crown for power, he steps through the door and awakes on a shore. The Eclipse once again tries to corrupt him, but he stops it by throwing away the necklace. I think symbolically this is because the necklace was hers, so he is cutting off the last tie to her. Afterwards, he finds Nitya, the real one, the one still in her Echelon gear. She tells him that he shouldn't have come here, but he knows that now. He came here to save her, but in doing so he invaded her dream. She wanted to be free of him and be herself, but Arjun couldn't let her leave him. That's why he took the job to save her. But he's now seen the world through her eyes and seen his own life through clearer eyes, ones not tainted by the promises of power and want. But now he knows. As he said to Kira, he wants to live honestly, and better if he can. Even when he gets to the shore, he admits that he does not deserve to see this, but he does wish to see Nitya one last time if he could. What she says after is blunt. It's a new day, and she wonders what Arjun will do with it now. No I love you, or I miss you, or even a thank you. Because if Nitya said that, she would be lying to herself, and Arjun doesn't deserve that. His dream was to be this hero and rescue his wife, but that was not hers. Hers was this beautiful, untainted shore full of freedom and peace, all the things she never had. As the game ends, we then hear police sirens in the background. This opens up lots of questions. With the police sirens in the background, it could imply that this was all in his head, that he was compartmentalizing and maybe vividly rethinking his life. The case evidence said that he was to report to the police regarding Sebastian's death. Perhaps he is thinking about what to do. It is also possible he is being taken back to that time in history, a redo if you will, to see what he will do now given all he's learned. Perhaps Arjun will sit there now and turn himself in. Or maybe this is just simply an acknowledgement of what he did. Up until this point, Arjun believed himself to be in the right, but his attitude at the beginning of the game and here on the shore are completely different. So maybe this is just a way for him to come to terms with what he's done in his life. Nitya's comments about tomorrow may reflect this. Yesterday was a lie, Arjun said. His past, in a sense, was a lie. What he believed was true power was not as it seemed. But tomorrow is another day, so what will he do with that? This is a phrase often used in motivational speaking, a way to say that while today's burdens may be heavy, the sun will still rise to greet you in the morning. So tomorrow can always be different than the day before. So with this in mind, perhaps Arjun will simply live truthfully and accept what he did. He will move on from these wants that plague his mind and live a better life. But of course, this does make you wonder if the planet in this journey then are even real. The necklace of the sun is meant to be a metaphorical symbol of his ties to Nitya. That's why he is never seen without it and stops the transformation and the pain of the preserver by taking it off. Removing it now means that he is moving on. But this then twists the initial purpose of the shore. The yellow shore then is not an entity that feeds on wants, but a sort of benevolent entity that is forcing Arjun to remember. This may explain why he is constantly reviving because it wants him trapped here until he learns the truth. It may even explain how he returned after becoming king. In the eyes of the shore, he failed, so it's no different than dying mid-run. So it sent him back to the very beginning to try again. Nitya also has a log that talks about Arjun's arrival, saying that it's been lifetimes for her but only yesterday for him. If taken literally, which, given the game, is probably not smart, but if taken literally, perhaps this came after the flashback. That it happened during another heavy night of drinking, which ended up putting him in a super bad nightmare that caused him to reflect on himself after losing both his wife and his best friend. I think, given the complexity of the story, both interpretations can exist. That this is a real thing that happened and that Arjun did go to Carcosa, or that all of this came from the mind of a man who has finally come to terms with himself after having lost everything he once had. What's clear though is two things. One is that Carcosa has, if not made him better, at least honest, and that this cutscene finally brings us to the end of Saros. Thank you all for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed. Like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new. Thank you to my returning viewers for coming back to another video, the patrons for supporting the work I do, and to PlayStation once again for sponsoring the video. Please be sure to get Saros for yourself with the link below. Take care everyone. Goodbye.